A quiet summer night in South Carolina's Low Country was shattered by a frantic 911 call. On June 7, 2021, attorney Richard Alex Murdaugh told dispatchers, "My wife and child have been shot badly." Minutes later, officers arrived at the family's sprawling hunting estate and found 52-year-old Maggie Murdaugh and 22-year-old Paul Murdaugh dead near the dog kennels. It wasn't just a tragedy, it was the unraveling of a dynasty. For nearly a century, the Murdaughs held deep power in South Carolina's 14th Judicial Circuit. Generations of men from the family had served as solicitors, wielding prosecutorial and political influence across the region. But this double homicide pulled back the curtain, revealing secrets, schemes, and scandals that stretched far beyond one night. As investigators dug into the case, they uncovered a web of financial crime, past deaths, and mounting pressure that had been closing in on the Murdaughs for years. From a mysterious roadside death in 2015 to a fatal boat crash in 2019 to allegations of embezzlement and staged violence, the story veered from tragedy into something closer to Southern Gothic noir. Why were Maggie and Paul killed? Who pulled the trigger? Welcome to Bad Things. Join us as we untangle the timeline, examine the theories, and determine what most likely happened the night the Murdaugh family fell apart. Do you want to bring bad things with you wherever you go? Our episodes are now available as a podcast. Look us up on your favorite podcast app and listen to the most truth-seeking true crime podcast out there. For nearly a century, the Murdaugh name ruled South Carolina's Low Country. Prosecutors, power brokers, they didn't just practice law here, they were the law. 3 generations held the top seat in the 14th Judicial Circuit. And even after the official dynasty ended in 2005, Alex Murdaugh stayed close to the levers of power. But behind the prestige, something darker had been simmering. By the summer of 2021, the mask was slipping. The first rumblings, 2015. A teenager's body on a lonely country road. No witnesses, no tire marks. In July 2015, 19-year-old Stephen Smith was found dead in the middle of a Hampton County highway. The death was ruled a hit and run, but his injuries didn't match that story. Rumors spread quickly. Whispers tied the Murdaugh family to the case. No proof, just fear and silence. The case went cold. A fall at the family home, 2018. In early 2018, longtime housekeeper Gloria Satterfield fell at Moselle, the Murdaugh estate. She'd helped raise Alex and Maggie's sons. The family said she tripped on the front steps. Weeks later, she was dead. Alex encouraged Gloria's sons to sue him, said it was the only way to get insurance money. They trusted him, and then the money vanished. More than $500,000 gone, funneled through fake accounts. No one knew, not yet. The boat crash that changed everything, 2019. The crash happened just before 2 a.m. on February 24, 2019. A 17-foot sea hunt boat, barreling through the darkness, slammed into a bridge piling. 6 young people were thrown. 1 never surfaced. Mallory Beach, 19, was found dead a week later. At the wheel, allegedly, was Paul Murdaugh, drunk, defiant, and underage. Witnesses said Alex showed up at the hospital, moving between rooms, trying to control the story. A survivor said it plainly. Paul couldn't be touched. Paul was charged, eventually, but the Murdaugh name still protected him. He stayed free, waiting for trial. Meanwhile, the Beach family filed a civil suit, and attorneys started digging into Alex's finances. Cracks were forming. The pressure cooker, June 2021. By the time summer hit, the pressure was unbearable. On June 7th, Alex was confronted by his law firm. Hundreds of thousands in client money couldn't be accounted for. 3 days later, a hearing in the Beach lawsuit could force him to open his books. That evening, Maggie was at the family's beach house. She didn't want to come home. She told a friend Alex was acting fishy, but eventually she did. Paul was called in too. Around 8:44 p.m., Paul recorded a short video at the dog kennels, trying to show a friend's injured dog. In the background, 3 voices: Paul, Maggie, and Alex. A few minutes later, Maggie and Paul were dead. The killings. Paul was shot twice with a shotgun. The second blast was catastrophic, leaving nothing intact. Maggie was gunned down with a different weapon, a high-powered .300 blackout rifle. 5 shots, 2 to the head. Casings were found yards apart. She had tried to run. The scene was quiet, cold. No signs of a break-in, no defensive wounds, no chance. At 10:06 p.m., Alex dialed 911. "My wife and child have been shot badly." He told deputies he'd been at his mother's house, 15 minutes away, and came home to the horror. He was dressed in a clean white shirt. No blood, no dirt. He claimed to have checked for pulses. Officers found no trace of that on him. And yet, just hours later, police issued a strange statement. No threat to the public. Which raised a question: did they already know who did it? 10 days after the murders, Alex's brothers appeared on national television. "My brother loved Maggie and Paul more than anything," said Randy Murdaugh. "There's no way he had anything to do with this." They pointed to threats Paul had received after the boat crash. So did Alex. In his first police interviews, he floated the idea. Whoever did this, they thought about it for a long time. But not everyone was convinced. Marion Proctor, Maggie's sister, noticed something. He wasn't focused on finding the killer, she later said in court. He said his #1 goal was clearing Paul's name. That felt strange, because mine was finding out who killed my sister and nephew. The roadside lie. September 3rd. Alex was forced to resign. The firm had uncovered massive financial misconduct. September 4th. Alex called 911 again, said he was shot changing a tire on the highway. It was a lie. Within days, investigators revealed he'd hired a former client, Curtis Eddie Smith, to shoot him, part of a plot to secure a $10 million insurance payout for his son Buster. The wound was superficial. The scheme made no sense, unless he was unraveling. SLED reopened the Gloria Satterfield investigation. Her son sued Alex for the stolen insurance money. This time, people were paying attention. On September 15th, Alex turned himself in. Murder charges. The following year brought wave after wave of indictments. Embezzlement, fraud, conspiracy. But in July 2022, the biggest charge dropped. Murder. Alex Murdaugh was indicted for killing Maggie and Paul. The trial began in January 2023. 6 weeks of evidence pulled the curtain all the way back. Cell data placed Alex at the kennels just minutes before the murders. A flurry of calls and steps after the killings looked like staged alibi behavior. A blue raincoat found hidden at his mother's tested positive for gunshot residue. His clothes, supposedly clean, may have carried microscopic blood spatter. And then, the moment that changed everything, Alex took the stand. He admitted he lied about not being at the kennels, blamed paranoia and addiction. But jurors had already heard Paul's voice in the final video, and Alex's right behind it. They deliberated for less than 3 hours. Verdict: guilty. Sentence: life twice over. The fall of the Murdaughs was complete. But the core question still lingered. Not just who, but why. The murders of Maggie and Paul Murdaugh didn't happen in a vacuum. They came at the crossroads of power, pressure, and paranoia. And in the months that followed, theories surfaced from courtrooms, internet forums, and kitchen tables across the Low Country. Some pointed the finger at Alex Murdaugh from the start. Others imagined an enemy from the shadows, a disgruntled local, a drug connection, or even a hired gun. What's clear is that these theories, taken seriously or not, shaped the story long before a verdict did. Let's walk through the leading ones. Theory 1. Alex Murdaugh did it. This is the official theory, the one that led to arrest, trial, and conviction. Prosecutors argued that on June 7, 2021, Alex Murdaugh, respected attorney, husband, and father, murdered his wife and son in cold blood. But this wasn't a crime of sudden rage. It was one of calculation. According to this version of events, Alex's life was falling apart. He was under investigation for stealing millions from both clients and colleagues. His law firm had just confronted him about missing funds. A wrongful death lawsuit stemming from the fatal 2019 boat crash was threatening to expose everything. His marriage was reportedly strained. Maggie had been looking into their finances and may have been in contact with a divorce lawyer. Facing financial and personal ruin, Alex allegedly made a horrifying choice: eliminate the people who posed the greatest threat to him. Paul was at the center of the boat crash case. Maggie might testify against him or leave entirely. If both were gone, he could spin their deaths as a tragic attack and buy himself time. He was the storm, said lead prosecutor Creighton Waters, and the storm was coming for him. The case against him relied on digital and forensic evidence. A video taken at 8:44 p.m. at the dog kennels captured Alex's voice at the crime scene just minutes before the murders, directly contradicting his earlier alibi. His phone showed a sudden burst of steps shortly after 9 p.m., likely during a frantic cleanup before leaving the property. Maggie's phone was later found discarded on the side of the road, along the very route Alex drove to his mother's house. Investigators also recovered a raincoat covered in gunshot residue from his parents' home. And Paul's wounds indicated a close-range execution, something difficult to square with the image of a devoted father. Later, Alex admitted to lying about his whereabouts that night, blaming his deception on paranoia and opioid addiction. But the prosecution's theory wasn't based on emotion. It was rooted in access, motive, and opportunity. Everything Alex needed, the weapons, the setting, the timing, was within his control. Still, for many observers, this explanation felt almost too monstrous to believe. Could a father and husband really do something so cold and calculated? That doubt left room for other theories. Theory 2. Revenge for the boat crash. Before Alex's arrest, this was the theory people talked about most. It was simple, emotional, believable. Paul Murdaugh had killed someone, Mallory Beach, and someone, a friend, a relative, or even just a bitter local, decided to take justice into their own hands. The Murdaughs weren't untouchable, the theory went, so someone struck back the only way they could, with a gun, not a courtroom. Paul had allegedly received threats. The community was divided. People whispered that justice had never come for Mallory. Even Alex himself leaned into this idea early. When deputies arrived at Moselle, he mentioned the boat crash and said whoever did this had thought about it for a long time. Maggie's sister remembered it too. It was the first thing he brought up. But problems with the theory began to emerge. For one, why kill Maggie? She wasn't involved in the boat crash. And why leave Alex, the man many saw as orchestrating Paul's legal defense, completely untouched? And then there's the forensic reality. No unknown DNA, no evidence of forced entry, no tire tracks, footprints, or signs that strangers had navigated the rural property in the dark without detection. Investigators chased down every threat Paul had received. None were found to be specific or credible. Even Alex's defense team admitted in court, it doesn't make sense. If this was revenge, why Maggie? Why spare the man who showed up at the hospital to shield Paul? In the end, the revenge theory remains emotionally resonant, especially to those angry about Mallory's death. But in terms of actual evidence, it never really held. Theory 3. 2 shooters, or a hidden accomplice. Then came the forensic curveball. 2 victims, 2 different guns. A shotgun for Paul, a .300 blackout rifle for Maggie. Some saw that as proof. This wasn't a solo job. Maybe Alex didn't act alone. Maybe he didn't act at all. The defense floated it in court. Online sleuths took it further. Could there have been 2 shooters, 1 for each victim? Could Alex have hired someone, or been present but not the triggerman? People pointed to Alex's later behavior, staging his own shooting in September, allegedly with help from Curtis Eddie Smith. If he could fake an attack and involve someone else, could the same thing have happened earlier? Others speculated about drug connections. Alex admitted to a long-term opioid addiction. Maybe he owed money. Maybe this was a message. But those scenarios require serious leaps. Why would 2 outsiders show up at Moselle, use family-owned weapons, and have zero trace? Why use 2 guns if you're trying to make it look like 1 killer? And if Alex wasn't involved, how did he know to bring up the boat crash, or that Paul had been targeted? Prosecutors argued that Alex likely used both guns himself, switching quickly, possibly to confuse the scene or because of a weapon jam. They also noted that 2 of the family's firearms went missing after the murders. No mystery DNA, no unknown vehicles, no accomplice ever identified. If someone else was there, one investigator testified, they left no evidence. None. Still, the 2-shooter theory lingered as a way to introduce doubt, because accepting that one man could do this alone, to his own wife and son, takes a psychological leap. But it doesn't mean it's not true. It didn't happen in a moment of rage. That's the part people get wrong. What happened at Moselle on June 7, 2021 wasn't impulsive. It was deliberate. A desperate calculation made by a man standing at the edge of everything he was about to lose. Alex Murdaugh was not just drowning in debt or exposed to legal risk. He was unraveling. His entire world, built on reputation, control, and the illusion of legacy, was crumbling beneath him. His law firm had begun to notice missing money. Lawyers for the Beach family were closing in, asking the kinds of financial questions that would expose years of deception. And at home, Maggie wasn't turning a blind eye anymore. She was asking questions of her own. Rumors suggested she had started looking at the family's finances, maybe even speaking with a divorce lawyer. Whether she actually was or not, Alex believed she could become a threat. Paul was already one. The boat crash case had become a fuse burning toward detonation. If Paul testified, if Maggie supported him, if any of it unraveled publicly, it would all come out. The theft, the lies, the addiction. The fear wasn't just of being caught, it was of being dethroned, disgraced, unmasked. So Alex reached for the one thing he had left: control. If he couldn't fix the storm closing in on him, maybe he could reset it. Maybe he could bury it. Literally. He called Maggie back to Moselle that evening. She hadn't planned to come. In fact, she was uneasy about it, texting a friend that Alex was acting fishy. But she came anyway, maybe out of habit, maybe to keep the peace. Paul was already there. They were drawn into place, not by force, but by trust. That's what makes it worse. The timing is tight. At 8:44 p.m, Paul took a short video at the kennels, documenting a friend's dog. His mother's voice can be heard in the background. So can Alex's. It's the kind of moment you don't notice when you're living it, but becomes everything when you're not. Just minutes later, Maggie and Paul were dead. Not in some frenzied explosion, but in a controlled sequence. Paul was shot first, inside the feed room, a shotgun blast to the chest or shoulder. He might have staggered forward. Maybe he didn't understand what was happening yet. Then the second shot came, devastating and final. There was no yelling, no cries for help. If Maggie had screamed, she would have been shot mid-sentence. Instead, she ran. That's what the spacing of shell casings and the pattern of wounds suggest. She turned, tried to flee across the gravel, but Alex was ready. By then, he had already switched weapons. A high-powered rifle. Familiar, effective. He didn't fire wildly. He tracked her, brought her down with precision, and then with cold finality, walked up and fired 2 final shots into her head. It was done in less than 5 minutes. There was no chance for either of them. No time to fight back. No warning. But the murders weren't the end of the plan. They were the start of a new performance. In the next few minutes, Alex picked up Maggie's phone and walked with it, perhaps considering whether to destroy it or use it. He eventually tossed it from his moving car. Then he began building the narrative, not with words yet, but with movement. His phone suddenly registered a surge in steps, likely as he rushed to clean himself up, change clothes, discard evidence. He got into his car and drove to his mother's, stayed just long enough to be seen, then returned to Moselle and called 911, sounding frantic, devastated, already talking about threats Paul had received. The alibi wasn't clean. It didn't need to be. It only needed to muddy the waters, shift suspicion, slow things down. The murders weren't about fooling police forever. They were about buying time. Time to divert attention, postpone a financial reckoning, and maybe, in his mind, reset the narrative as a grieving father, not a sinking fraud. But even the best performance unravels under pressure. The kennel video, that single moment of Paul filming a dog, captured the truth Alex couldn't erase. His own voice, unmistakable. He was there. He had lied. And once one lie cracked, the rest came into view. The frantic cleanup, the raincoat hidden at his mother's, the tossed phone, the missing guns, the timing that didn't line up. This wasn't the work of 2 killers. It wasn't revenge. It wasn't drug dealers or vigilantes hiding in the woods. No one else had motive. No one else had access. No one else was weaving a story the moment the bodies hit the ground. Only Alex Murdaugh. He didn't kill his wife and son in a blind rage. He killed them because they were in the way. Because in a twisted moment of logic, he believed that their deaths would solve his problems. That grief would cover his guilt. That blood would buy him time. He was wrong. What most likely happened that night was planned, carried out by someone who knew the property, the routine, the victims, someone who had everything to lose, and saw this as the only way not to lose it all. Alex Murdaugh didn't just destroy his family, he tried to weaponize their deaths, and in doing so, sealed his own.